This is Being Human. I'm your host, Richard Atherton. Tom Druitt, campaigner and social entrepreneur and CEO of The Big Lemon. Welcome.
Morning, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Yes, thank you. Great to see you. And I thought we'd start with those watching on YouTube. You could just about see my Stone Roses t-shirt in shot with a big lemon in homage to Tom and your venture. So, in fact, we should do a quick t-shirt comparison. So you've got one on, right? Happy is the new rich. Is that right?
Rich. That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. So,
yeah.
Awesome. So I'm sure we'll get, because happiness is a big theme, right, for Big Lemon. So I'm sure we'll get into that. So I thought we'd start, for those who've not heard of the Big Lemon, maybe we've got some international listeners as well. So what's the Big Lemon about? And where are you based, and sort of give us the story of the Big Lemon.
Cool. Well, the Big Lemon is based in Brighton. It's essentially a bus and coach company, but with a real kind of a vision of a whole new way of mobility, really. It started as a conversation in a pub in Brighton about 2006, and then we had a public meeting and just kind of took it from there. Essentially, the main themes that were discussed in the public meeting were affordability of public transport, sustainability of public transport, and the relationship with the community. So when we then we kind of started talking about the passenger experience and the whole, the whole kind of public transport experience, the way things work together, the way trains and buses and other modes all connected. And really, I think a lot of people felt at the time, this was just over 11 years ago, that it just wasn't, public transport was such an important part of the solution to many kind of societal and environmental problems. And everyone's perception of it was just that it was not really meeting its potential. And for very many different reasons. The experience on the bus, if you were getting the bus, sometimes really good, sometimes really poor. The kind of information around fares and tickets and things like that, very poor. You had to get a different ticket for each different company that you got. And there wasn't much information about, what was available in terms of, deals and that kind of thing. And then if you look at the kind of sustainability of it, it was, just old clunky diesel buses belching out smoke. It obviously leaves a lot to be desired. Quite often buses, at the time, I think they have modernised a lot, but, there used to be a huge number of really dirty old things. And they were dirty inside as well, and not very well cared for. And, the whole thing was just a bit old and tired, and the industry just felt like it needed a rocket up its backside. But apart from that, I think we had the privatisation of buses in the 80s, and that was under Thatcher. And since then, buses have basically been a profit-making enterprise. And through that, I think a lot of the kind of community, the community need for public transport as a service to people in the community. I think that kind of got lost. So, for example, at the moment, bus companies will only run profitable routes, and they'll let other routes go, and local authorities have to pick up the pieces. And if they don't have any money, they don't, and then the kind of less well-used services just disappear. And we're seeing that all over the country. Public local authorities strapped for cash, just closing down bus services because they're too expensive to run and not viable for kind of profit-making businesses to run. So essentially, you've got commercial enterprises picking off the cream and leaving the rest to rot. And obviously, that's not good for anyone. The Big Lemon really started as a way to make it human scale again, make it real, make it about those people in those communities that need those bus services, and that was kind of whether or not it was making money. We obviously have to make we have to make ends meet, same as any other business. But if we've got 3 services that are making money and 2 that aren't, as long as the total is sustainable financially, then that's a good thing. That's fine.
So you can push it a bit further in terms of those less well-used routes than a company that was purely profit-driven could. Do you see?
Yeah, completely. I mean, we've got a situation in Brighton where we have a commercial operator that's very good, that does very good service, but their profits last year could have paid for the whole of the subsidised network in Brighton about 15 times over. But it's not, because they don't want to run the loss-making routes, and so the council has to subsidise them. So it just the model's just not really right. If buses were all run by community businesses, then there wouldn't be any need for subsidy, and the community businesses would use profits from the good services to pay for the ones that are not profitable, on the basis that they're socially necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
But then presumably you still have a limit, right? I mean, if there's one individual, 10 miles in the middle of nowhere, and so do you still have to draw some kind of a line?
Yeah. I mean, if it's, if it makes no sense at all, right? If it's one individual 10 miles away, then the most efficient way of getting them to where they need to go is in a taxi or something like that. It's not a bus.
Right.
So I think you have to tailor the size of the vehicle to the demand quite closely. Otherwise, your assets are not being used well.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And so when you started it so you had this public, I mean, that kind of interesting to me. So you don't hear necessarily of people starting businesses with a public meeting. So that really, I suppose that's a statement of intent from the start, that you're about the community.
Right.
And so was it clear from that meeting that this should be, because you're a CIC, right? Like a non-profit. Yeah.
Well, it's a community interest company. So we make profit. Well, we try to. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But the difference is that our profit the majority of our profit has to be used to benefit the community.
Okay.
So we can't, if we make, say, 10 grand one year, we can't just, say, there you go.
You can't go and buy a yacht.
Thanks very much. That's that was good. Well done, directors. It's no, it doesn't work like that. We have a formula. So it's a bit of a hybrid model. As a community interest company, you can be incorporated by shares or by guarantee. And essentially, it's basically like a normal limited company, but with this extra community responsibility. And we are incorporated by shares because we want to sell shares to members of the community. We want to get that buy-in from people. And, if possible, if we can make a profit, we can then make those investments worthwhile for people.
Right.
So, however, we have a formula where 80% of the profit is reinvested for developing more services for the community, and 10% is given in dividends to shareholders, and 10% goes into our staff fund, which is a kind of hardship / social fund for the team to kind of do what they want with.
Oh, interesting. And I read sometimes that the critique of companies that are not for profit is that they don't necessarily build up the capital to then invest in innovation. But of course, what's interesting about your company is that you still you take capital and you do very much invest it in innovation, which is a big part of your story, right?
Yeah, massive. I mean, most of our capital is reinvested. So most of our profit is reinvested as capital. And yeah, I think sometimes that that criticism is justified. I think I wanted very much with the Big Lemon to make sure that we could demonstrate that actually any business could run like this. It's not a charity. We're not a load of do-gooders just trying to do nice things in our community. We're running a business, and that business has to work commercially and financially, but ultimately. And I think this, going back to when the first businesses were started, the business for me is about doing something for your community. A shopkeeper is providing a vital service, i.e. food and so on, to members of their community. So I think it's only relative recent history where business has become a kind of byword for kind of capitalist whatever. Excess, yeah, completely. And the businesses, I don't think in the past were run. They weren't run to make people ridiculously rich. They were run to provide people with an honest living and generate benefit for their communities. So really the Big Lemon is the kind of, let's get back to what business is all about and run business for the benefit of the community. But it needs to, in order to achieve our aims, we have to make money in order to invest and grow and do things better for our community. But ultimately, the whole point of it is to provide a good service for the community. And I think that's what has got lost with the big corporates, is that ultimately they're not there to provide a service for the community. They provide their service in order to make money for their shareholders in London and around the world.
Right. And then they might argue, well, they're often the biggest investors are pension holders, and so that's actually putting money in the pockets of pensioners. So ultimately, they do provide those profits cycle their way back to the community.
Ultimately, in quite a long-winded, roundabout way, with no guarantee that anyone's actually going to benefit.
Right.
I think it's just too far-fetched. Those pensioners that hold those, have those investments through their pension funds, if they actually had more locally based community services, then they wouldn't need those pension funds to do so. They wouldn't need those pension funds. I think there's just too much lost through the system.
Right.
People at the top end of the company earning £4 million a year. I mean, that's just excess at ridiculous levels. But I know I digressed a tiny bit. You asked me about,
in a sense, but that's part of who you are, right? You declare yourself as a campaigner and the CEO of Big Lemon. I mean, that's a big part of your story, isn't it? It's that you have a sort of progressive political agenda, which is sort of seems to be part and parcel of your ethos for doing business and who you are as Tom Druitt, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I guess it's about having a basic philosophy for life, and then using every area of your work to progress that in some way.
Right. Yeah. And I suppose one of the things so I think this community angle is really interesting, and as well as that is the tech angle and the fact that you're now depending on where you come from, or the ecological angle, because you're now on the verge of being the only bus company in the UK with all electric fleet. Is that right?
So we're not there yet, but we've recently ordered 4 more electric buses. We've got 3 on the road at the moment, and we're putting in a proposal for 5 more to various people who might be able to part fund it, or them. So yes, if we once we've got the 4 that we're due to receive in the autumn, our public bus services in Brighton will be fully electric, and that will be the first fully electric public bus network run by any operator in the UK.
Wow, I mean, that's so interesting, isn't it?
It's a small network. I just have to make that clear. So, there are companies that run larger electric fleets. I went to visit a bus depot in London recently that has 48 electric buses. The whole depot is only electric buses. There's 48. But they're part of a massive operator that runs thousands of buses across the country. So they're doing good stuff at this one bus depot, but they're a big group. They can they've got a lot of resources, and they've got still 95% of their fleet non-electric, still diesel buses. But yeah, I think this is more like, in terms of its impact, it's more a statement of intent. We're going fully electric, fully zero emissions, fully powered by renewable energy, and then we'll grow from there. And there's no other company that's made that commitment in the UK. I hope many do. I would love us not to be the only company that ran a full fleet of renewably powered electric buses.
Right, that sounds echoes of Elon Musk there, where he talks about, he wants to give away a lot of his IP around developing the Tesla so that others can catch him up, basically, sort of encouraging the car companies to catch up and build electric.
Well, I think Elon, I mean, I'm very flattered that you've put
you in the same sentence.
You put me and Elon in the same sentence. And I think what we're doing is on altogether very different scale. However, yeah, he's a guy that's got a vision of a different kind of future. And that's where that motivation comes from. I know Elon's not in business to make money. You can see that by what he does. He's got he's on a mission to realize his vision of the future. And yeah,
but could you make the case that he's also community focused, but for him the community is the human race on the planet, if we were to give him that, and so what we're really talking but he's very much big business. He's got money from banks and he's on the public stock market and so on. So he's coming from a similar place. It's just he's doing it at a different scale, and his definition of community is broader. Or do you think that any kind of enterprise that seeks to serve on that level is sort of flawed in your philosophy?
So it's an interesting point, because I think the main reason why I think that corporations are basically flawed structurally is because it's, they're ultimately ruled by the money rather than the people. And Tesla and Elon's other businesses, they're a bit of an anomaly. And you could argue in a way that Facebook is also a bit of an anomaly, because these are big corporations that have all the bank money and everything, but they're still very much directed by that one person's philosophy, ideals, vision, and so forth. So I think there are a couple of exceptions, but the problem structurally is that those companies are only going to do well in the arena that they've kind of set up market, i.e., the stock exchange. They're only going to do well if they increase their profits year on year and increase them by more than they increased them last year, and return more money to shareholders than they did before, and so on and so forth. And so ultimately, there becomes a conflict between that person's vision and what course of action could most quickly achieve that vision, and the kind of requirement that company has committed to become a better corporation in the eyes of the stock market every year. And those two things aren't the same things. So it's an interesting conflict. And if you've got somebody like Elon, I wouldn't be surprised if actually, if it came to a choice between the two, I quite imagine him saying, well, sod the stock market, I'm going to generate a new solar-powered rocket or something, because that's what I want to do. but then, if he then chose to do that, then some of his money might walk.
Right.
And I think that's the problem, that once you're playing that game, you're very much, entangled in the whole corporate system. And you've got to play the stock market game. Otherwise, your money will walk. And if your money walks, then you can't any longer achieve your vision. I agree that he's working on to a community, and to a community that's, kind of a global community rather than a local community. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens if he's faced with a kind of, the choice: pursue the vision or pursue the money.
Right. And so these exceptions that you're citing here exist because of the extraordinary individuals at the top, or perhaps just the way they've managed to structure their shareholdings so that they've kept a good amount of control. But as a structure, it tends to produce companies with a different focus than the exceptions we mentioned. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I think as a structure it does, and I'm not sure whether, it might be that there are just some exceptions to the rule, and they do well, and that's great. But I think it might also be the case that if you try and play both games, then ultimately the conflict can't continue forever, and one wins out. I know Richard Branson, for example. He played the stock market game in the 80s, and got so frustrated by that game, having to pander to the money, that he then took Virgin private again, and had to buy all his shareholders out, which was quite expensive, but he did it. Right. And in a way, whatever you think of Branson, I know he's a bit of a Marmite character, but he also was somebody on a mission, and he had an idea of how, especially customer service was supposed to work, and he wanted to change all the industries he got involved in to fit his vision of how things should be done. It'd be even better if he paid all his taxes, but hey ho.
Right. Yeah, I suppose that's the other thing you're committed to with a CIC is all of the money stays onshore, right? There's no.
Yeah. We're not registered in Bermuda. Right. As much as I'd like to have an excuse.
Presumably you're competing with. But you're competing. Are you competing with bus companies who do play those tricks? So you've got to work even harder, or?
That's an interesting question. I don't know, to be honest. I think we're not really competing with bus companies, to be honest. We're competing with mostly we're competing with cars, essentially. We're trying to provide a transport solution that is more enjoyable for people to use than their own car.
Right.
And I think, in a way, our main competitor in the bus industry in Brighton is one of the big groups. But we get along pretty well with them. I don't agree with their business model, but that's fine. I don't think they care that I don't agree with it. But they're run by nice people, and they run a good service. And I think and we work quite well together on a kind of local pragmatic level. And I think the guys
that's interesting with people. So you don't, because when you previously said we only compete with cars, not the bus company, I was like, well, is that because you've crushed the competition and you've eliminated them from your routes, or as you say, is it because you have a sort of gentleman's agreement to only service certain routes, or what? How does that work?
No, those kind of gentlemen's agreements are basically illegal. So, no, I think it's about acknowledging that. I mean, when we set up the Big Lemon, it wasn't an attempt at world domination of the bus industry. It was an attempt to change the bus industry, make it more community focused, make the passenger experience more personal, make the information much clearer, make the service more fun and friendly, make the buses more sustainable, and so on and so forth. So I think the best. I mean, the fact that we have existed in Brighton has changed the landscape of bus services in Brighton, and I think has improved it a lot. Not just because of the services that we've run, but the changes that we've either kind of somehow forced through, or the fact that we're here providing X means that somebody else has to up their game. I think so when we started, we focused first of all on the university routes, and we got a big following from students, and that started to hurt the main kind of provider that ran the other services to the university. And so they started having to be a bit more creative. I think previously they'd taken students for granted, and there were no student fares, there were no special deals. It was all, students just had to pay the same fares as everyone else. And it was a massive, it was a big cash cow for the bus company. But as soon as there was an alternative, suddenly they were offering much better deals. The fares went down. The fares on the night bus, they used to be charged like an extra fare on top of the normal fare, and that was abolished because we weren't charging that. So over a period of a couple of years, the frequencies, the prices, and the service generally that was provided by the other bus company to the students improved dramatically. And that was basically because they knew that if they didn't up their game, then students would use our buses instead. That was a positive thing. I think then the next main thing that happened was that that we pushed through with the council a kind of change in policy around the provision of public transport in Brighton Hove, because before that it was very much it was just a kind of one show in town. The council wasn't interested in working with anyone else. It was just they had a kind of bipartisan relationship with Brighton Hove buses, and they kind of had that kind of system stitched up, and the monopoly was pretty much official. But we had a petition that went to the council, and it asked for essentially freeing it all up to allow other operators equal status and to play a part in the city's transport. And that was successful. And as a result, we now have a multi-operator ticket, a multi-operator quality bus partnership, and a whole load of other things that that have kind of encouraged other operators to thrive in the city. And we now have 3. I mean, it was 4 kind of smaller companies, all providing services in the city, whereas previously it was pretty much just one.
Right.
Yeah, and the city council has benefited as well, because the subsidised services that I was talking about before, they pretty much the only company that used to bid for those was Brighton and Hove Buses, and so now that there are 3 or 4 companies all bidding for those, the prices are much lower, and the council gets a much better deal.
Right. Yeah.
And that's local council taxpayers and the local community ultimately. So, there's a huge amount you can do as a small business to impact on the wider system and the larger businesses, and the way the authorities work with those businesses. It's not, you don't have to be a big company before you get any opportunity to change things.
Right. No, I can see that. And again, I'm going to put it in the same sentence as Elon Musk again. I can see the parallels in terms of you're coming at it from this mission, right? This, I want to improve the community and the service to the community. He's coming at it from the terms of I want to improve the globe, or whatever he's coming from. And but he's having similar impacts, right? I mean, he's forcing the other companies to up their game in terms of electric cars. He's challenging some of the regulations around dealerships. He wants to sell direct to consumer, right? And all of these existing car companies have got these dealership relationships. So he's challenging, and with the autopilot stuff, he's challenging regulations in terms of driving regulations. So what I'm getting is it really so much that you're small, or is it really so much that you're coming from a place of purpose and mission, and this is what has you be disruptive?
No, I think completely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It is about the purpose and the mission, and I think my point was basically that it doesn't matter if you're small, as long as you have that purpose and mission, you can still impact on the industry as a whole. I mean, if you're looking at through global terms, Tesla was a minnow compared with all the other companies in the car industry, but they've changed the game now. And as you say, all the other companies are scrambling to produce electric vehicles because Tesla has shown that that they work and people love them, and so on and so forth. I think before Tesla, people used to laugh at electric cars, didn't they? They were funny little, crazy little things that wackos in the West End of London used to, or Camden or somewhere, just.
Or milkman drove. My uncle was a milkman. He had an electric car.
But he's completely changed people's perception of electric cars. And I think that's, with us running electric vehicles, I mean, we essentially want to, right from the beginning, we wanted to run the buses with the lowest environmental impact possible. So we started off in those days running the buses on waste cooking oil from local restaurants. And that worked really well for, I don't know, 5 or 6, well, probably 7 or 8 years. Yeah. And 2 or 3 years ago, it stopped working for the buses simply because the bus technologies had kind of developed to the point where if you didn't use the exact same fuel that the bus was designed to run on, then it just wouldn't work. Whereas older machines are much more forgiving. And yeah, we've got some old Volvos and Mercedes that kind of chew through anything. But yeah, so biodiesel stopped working. Biodiesel from waste cooking oil. You have to process it, and once it's processed, it's generally called biodiesel. It doesn't, it's not actually anything to do with diesel. It just refers to the fact that it's a diesel replacement. Once that wasn't really an option anymore, luckily for us, it happened at just about the same time that electric buses were becoming a thing. That actually, they existed and they worked and so on and so forth. So that was kind of for us the obvious choice. Much more expensive option, obviously. Electric buses cost roughly twice the cost of the equivalent diesel bus, which means the 4 that we've just bought were almost £300,000 each. So a completely different business model, much more capital focused because they're so expensive, and then obviously the running costs are much lower because there's no diesel to put in them or biodiesel.
Right. I actually got a Tesla taxi the other day.
Yeah.
And he spent £75,000 on his taxi, but he'd done the numbers, and over 10 years it was going to be cheaper than a petrol.
Right.
So he bought it. Right.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing ride, and he did his sort of whatever it is what's the psycho mode or whatever on the Tesla where you just so I had
there is I can't remember what it's called, but that crazy one.
So that was fun.
No, it's fair play to it. And there is some risk involved because in the bus industry, no electric buses have existed long enough to reach the end of their life, which basically means that nobody knows how long they're going to last for. So we've worked out if it lasts more than 7 years, then we're quids in. And if it doesn't, then,
back to cooking oil.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure in 7 years, the technology will have improved quite dramatically.
Yeah.
But it is, it is more expensive. But I think for us, it was the obvious choice. But also, if we can accelerate the change to a fully electric fleet, then, that does put pressure on the larger companies to change their game. If people start expecting bus companies to have much less impact and run zero emission vehicles, and if they say, well, look, the Big Lemon's only got a dozen vehicles, but they've managed to, they're only little, but they've managed to go fully electric, then why can't you? I mean, just as a comparison again, apparently to change the whole of the Brighton Hove bus fleet to zero emissions would cost £176 million, which is a ridiculously large amount of money. However, that's about 10 years worth of profit for that company. So essentially it could be done over 10 years at zero cost to the to the company, just by using its profit to reinvest in it. And
then, of course, and then the added advantage there is that they're then not at the mercy of the vagaries of the oil price then, right, over that period. So it de-risks their business to some extent.
Yeah. But, but last March they returned, or whenever it was, they returned, I don't know, 16, 17 million back to shareholders. And I think, well, that could have changed 10% of their fleet. Mm-hmm. And this is where we get back to the corporation argument. In a way, it doesn't matter what the directors of that company believe in. They might really want to change their fleet to zero emissions really soon, but because they're playing this money game on the stock market, they have to do other things and kind of lose the money, if you like, that way, rather than investing it in what they want.
But what's to stop your shareholders? You said that a lot of you're to some extent funded through selling shares, and yeah. But what about those guys? What's to stop them saying, "Oh, actually, we're sort of over the the electric thing. We want more dispersals of profit back to us, and we'll spend it in the community in other ways." I mean, is that somehow baked into your structure that you don't have to play the same game with your shareholders?
So there's a couple of safeguards, obviously, with the community interest company. There are rules. So, for example, we have to reinvest at least 70% of our profits into community benefit. We can't, if shareholders said, this 80-20 rule, we don't like it, we want a 50-50. Reinvesting some obviously is sensible, but we want 50% of profits distributed to shareholders. Well, that's just illegal and not possible under our structure.
So it's a bit, yeah.
So I think that's why we chose to be a CIC. So that would kind of safeguard the values of the company within the law. And I think, shareholders could say, this electric thing, why are you doing that? Let's spend the money on something else. But then I think it comes back down to, the articles of association of the company and so on. And sustainability is one of the founding blocks of the business. So in a way, it would be kind of unconstitutional to abandon it, because it's one of the reasons that we exist.
Right.
So and because of that, we've attracted shareholders that share those values and want to see our vision, become reality.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, and they also have to sign a statement when they become a shareholder that they do share the values and the vision of the Big Lemon.
Right.
So I mean, who can tell? Yeah, what crazy things might happen. But there are safeguards that you can make to make sure that the reason you set up the company is not going to get lost in the future.
Right.
And then you attract people that share the same passion for seeing that happen, and then they joined us because they want sustainable transport, not because they want.
You started a movement as much as you did a company, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think that's the aim, ultimately. Yeah, and I think our investors are. I think this is where we come back to community business as a business model, because our investors, I think it's fair to say, their primary reason for investing is to kind of enable our vision to become reality, yes, they need to make, they need to make sure that their money's not going to get lost or frittered away. And so, kind of financial discipline is very important. But, if we can give them a modest return that justifies, kind of inflation plus a little bit, then really they've invested in us because they want this thing to work, not because they want to buy the next yacht or something. Although that wouldn't be too bad either.
Eco yacht, obviously. So I've got one question from long-term listener Peter Venn, who's got this critique about the lifetime environmental impact of producing electric vehicles. So have you done the analysis on that? Because I know that just producing the batteries and creating the vehicle itself has an environmental impact, right?
Okay, so we haven't done the analysis, but somebody with much more resource has. It's the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership. They do testing of various different buses, and they provide all sorts of data on essentially greenhouse gas emissions. And so we can compare with they produce a certificate for each low emission bus, and we can compare what the lifetime well-to-wheel greenhouse gas emissions of our bus is compared with a standard diesel vehicle.
Did you say well-to-wheel?
Yeah.
As in a well that you get the minerals out of to...
So,
what do you mean by well?
So, well being a diesel well, an oil well.
Oil one. So it's right.
Yeah. So it's compared with. It's called well to wheel because that's its baseline is a diesel vehicle, but essentially it's the lifetime costs of the lifetime greenhouse gas emissions from everything,
including building it,
including building the vehicle and disposing of the parts or recycling or whatever happens at the end of the vehicle's life. And it includes obviously assembly of the vehicle and transport to where it's going to be used and so on and so forth, and also the obviously from the oil side, getting the oil out of the ground and refining it and transporting it and so on. So, there's the impact of batteries is potentially large. There's no way of getting around that. The cost environmentally of our buses is in large part the environmental cost of producing the batteries. People often talk about the cost of disposing the batteries. To be honest, the resources in those batteries are now so valuable that I don't think that's as much of a consideration as it was. Batteries are not being put in landfill sites. They're being meticulously unpicked, and 99.9% of the parts reused to make new batteries or other things. So, batteries, they take a huge amount of energy and, chemical, processes and so on to create them. But then in terms of resource use, those, the minerals that are used to make batteries are reused and reused and reused. So the data from the low carbon vehicle partnership. So over the lifetime of a average Euro 5 diesel bus, it produces an equivalent of 998.1 grams of CO2 per kilometre that it drives in its life. One of our electric buses will produce 304.3 grams of CO2 per kilometre in its manufacturer use and disposal. So that's a saving of 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So there is an impact, of course, but it's a massive reduction. And I think there are other benefits in terms of air quality being the biggest one. Air quality in cities is a massive public health risk, causes thousands of deaths each year. And, with zero emissions vehicles, that particular hazard will be far reduced. I think we'll, in 20, 30 years, we'll look back at the 20th century and the first bit of this century and think, what were we thinking of doing? What were we thinking? How on earth
did people breathe in those cities?
Allow that to happen? Like, people just belching out poison into the air for everyone else to breathe. Like, isn't that just the most ridiculous thing? It's a bit like, the conversation around the smoking ban. Suddenly, now people think, well, wait a minute, if you're in a restaurant or pub or even public transport, if you're a non-smoker, why should you be breathing all the smoke that smokers are smoking?
Yeah.
But, as a non-driver, why should you be breathing all the smoke that drivers are belching out every day of the week? It's like passive smoking, basically, but it's perfectly legal. And, I think we'll look back and think this is all a bit weird how we allowed this to happen.
Yeah, I get it when I cycle on my Boris bike in London. I cycle across London. I feel like I've just had 40 fags or cigarettes.
Right.
American listeners, be careful there. And and then because I also have spent some of my time out in the countryside, it's night and day the difference, right? So I think you're right. I think we'll look back at it. I mean, I think we've improved from what I understand of horse and carts and all the horrific smells and pollution at earlier part of the 20th century. But you're right. I think people will still look back at this era as being pretty filthy and disgusting.
Yeah.
People. Yeah.
And it's a bit like back in a couple of 100 years ago, people used to pour everything into rivers. All chemical waste and factory waste and everything just dumped in the river. Oh, it's all right. It'll just wash away and go somewhere else, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. And then suddenly, fish start dying and the seas start getting polluted and full of plastic. And people are thinking, wait a minute, what? You can't just do that. And now, you can't just build a factory next to a river and pump all your waste into the river. It's not what we do. I think they're very, very similar kinds of things. And it just takes a bit of a shift in consciousness, really, to, for these things to suddenly become, seen for what they are, just completely crazy.
Mm. And to be fair to people, I didn't have the technology to do it well. until recently to do it any other way. But now the technology exists, and there are companies like yours.
You say that. There were electric buses 100 years ago, and a friend of mine's written a really interesting book about how the electric buses that were built, over 100 years ago and used, they were running in London and Brighton. They were essentially, they were killed off basically on purpose. And I'm just trying to remember what the book was called. It's something like the Big Swindle or something like that.
Right, I've heard this before. I mean, I know it's sometimes couched as a conspiracy theory, but for those who, obviously, those who don't believe it's a conspiracy, or at least it was a conspiracy, but valid in the sense that there were forces that killed it off.
Yeah,
but just not just buses, but cars in general, right? And this was a scheme by the oil companies and so on.
Yeah, the book's called A Most Deliberate Swindle, and this was people working very hard to kill off the technology in order to preserve their commercial interests.
Right.
And as a result, we've lost a century of zero emission vehicle innovation.
Which does beg the question, then why are they allowing it this time around? But maybe that's another podcast.
Yeah, right. I think that is another. That's another podcast, definitely. And I think, in very simple terms, the world has moved on, and there's much more pressure and much more awareness of public health issues and air pollution and so on.
Okay.
So, 100 years ago, Joe Public probably didn't see diesel vehicles as being bad or, unhealthy. They just, they were new and exciting and, different. And, they probably didn't care whether they were powered by diesel or electric. Whereas now it's a much bigger thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to bring up was, so the other big part of Big Lemon is so there's the eco angle, there's the community angle, but there's also the internal culture, and there's this big focus on happiness and well-being of your staff. So can you tell me a little bit more about your philosophy in terms of leading the company and creating the culture of Big Lemon?
Yeah, I think it, in a way, it comes back to the passenger experience that we were talking about. I think that it's impossible to deliver a good passenger experience if you've got a miserable, underpaid, angry driver who hates his job or her job, doesn't like the management, and so on and so forth. Apart from that, obviously we I think the Big Lemon, it's great. Kind of, I love the title of your podcast, because the Big Lemon is all about being human and returning businesses and the way we interact with our community to a human scale. And in the same way, we want to bring that staff relationship back to a human level, back to a human scale. We only have, we have a much smaller team. I think our kind of strategy for growth as well is not to become massive, but to replicate ourselves. So we continue to have a small team that knows each other, trusts each other, likes working with each other, has a good time at work, has good relationship with managers, and essentially enjoys, if the team are well looked after and enjoying themselves, then they're going to give them a much better service to passengers on the bus. So, I think obviously there are very good reasons to be kind of a good employer, but one really good reason to be a good employer is because it ultimately provides a much better service to your customers as well. I think that's the kind of philosophical basis for it. We do a lot of things. I think most people come to us and say, I got fed up working where I was before. I was just treated like a number. And yeah, they had their driver number, and there were 800 of them, and they didn't know all their colleagues, let alone their managers and the senior team. So yeah, I think in a large corporation you've got essentially a machine where everyone's slightly dehumanized, whereas in a community business you've got a human scale family, really. And we've always tried to run the Big Lemon as much like a family.
And is there anything you've had to change about your style to enable it? Is there any transition you've had to go through?
Yeah, I suppose. Before I did this, I was involved with the military for a number of years, and it's a very different kind of system. And in the military, you basically just did what you're told, and if you passed your orders down the line, then you expected everyone who received them to follow them. And there wasn't much discussion about the right, folks, what should we do about this this challenge? Or it was you just said, right, this is what we're going to do, and everyone just had to do it. And likewise from your seniors, you didn't get your opinion. Nobody cared what you thought. You just had to take whatever came and deal with it. Whereas we operate in the Big Lemon in a very different way, and we talk about the big decisions that the company is facing and how to how we want to address them and how we want to move forward. And I think that engagement is very important in a community business, or indeed in any business. And people want to have the opportunity to affect change within their organization. I think if people, if people just feel powerless, then ultimately they're not going to enjoy it. So we do, we have we meet as a team, as a whole team, every 3 months. And we generally have a kind of morning of, the big questions, and then, a barbecue or something, and a fun afternoon doing something different. So, the social aspect is very important, but I think people appreciate having, having a say in how the company's run. And we have, one of our drivers, we have a kind of driver on the board. I think that's very important to have that input to kind of bring the driver's perspective, because the driver is the person who is delivering the frontline service, and they see everything. They see, how the passengers are responding to, the new timetable, for example, or whether they, maybe one bus is uncomfortable or whatever it is. But the driver's the person that sees everything, and those perspectives are really important at the board. And I think also it's important for all the drivers to know that their interests are being their interests are being voiced at the highest level. When I say the highest level, it's not a hierarchy, but at the kind of the fundamental levels of decision making.
Right. And if I were to play sort of arch capitalist devil's advocate here, if automated buses come along, right? I mean, that technology is going to hit at some point, whether it's 5 years or 10 years or whatever. So it's coming. What happens then? How do you have we need to get rid of our drivers to sit, conversation when you've got a driver representative on the board? I mean, do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the answer is that automated buses are not providing a community service. The role of the bus driver is not just to drive the bus; it's to look after the passengers. And in an automated vehicle, that's just not going to happen. So, there may be a role that automated vehicles play in providing kind of mass transit, but essentially they're not automated vehicles are not going to provide a service like what we provide. And when we recruit bus drivers, how well they drive the bus is important, but it's not the first thing we look for in a person. We're looking fundamentally for nice, friendly people who care about other people and care about giving a good service to our passengers. And that's what their role is on the bus. The fact that they're moving the steering wheel around at the same time is fundamental but secondary.
So you'd see them continuing?
Yes, completely. Yeah.
And
they would. If you lost the bus driver, then 3/4 of the work on the bus wouldn't be done.
Interesting. Okay, so so it sounds like you've created very different cultures than the one you were used to in the army. Has there ever been a sort of a moment where you've caught yourself and you've been like, you've sort of been in maybe as a moment of stress and you've barked out an order, or has there been ever a moment where you sort of found yourself?
I'm sure there's probably been quite a few. I don't think I bark out orders very often, but my nature is quite impatient. I like to progress things quickly, and I get frustrated by things taking too long. So, I can get kind of short, same as everyone else. But it's generally because something hasn't happened, or for goodness sake, people, why can't we shift this along a bit? That's about the extent of my anger.
That sounds very British. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like it's not been a huge challenge to sort of embrace this more, how might you say it, sort of participative culture. Yeah. And the other thing that caught my eye was the Happy Bus initiative.
Right. Yeah.
Which you explained came from a sort of brainstorming session, and that's so is that something where you kind of come up? I'm interested in the process of when you have an idea like that, and how do you then have it manifest in the company?
So the Happy Bus was actually something that came up at the Happy Startup Summer Camp. We were told, I think we were in groups of 5 or 6 people. We had 15 minutes to come up with an idea, basically a whole business plan for a new venture. And we came up with this. It was slightly crazy, but we came up with this thing called the Happy Helicopter, and the Happy Helicopter would descend on somebody who needed a bit of a lift.
Metaphorically, literally.
Yeah, and then take them to a happy place and do happy things. So it might be the helicopter parking on outside somebody's workplace and extracting them from their daily grind behind their desk, bundling them in a helicopter and taking them to a castle somewhere where 50 of their friends and family were having a party for them, or something else. So we came up with this idea, and it, the public were going to nominate people they thought deserved a special prize, and we worked out how it was going to be paid for and how so on and so forth. And at the end of this this exercise, it was only obviously an exercise, but it was good fun. And at the end of it, I just thought, wait a minute. We could just do this with a bus. We don't need a helicopter. So I said to the others, look, do you mind if I just run with this? And they were like, no, go for it. So now we run the Happy Bus. And basically anyone can nominate anyone. There's a link on our website. And the idea is that the nominator comes up with a plan, maybe in conjunction with somebody's friends or family, as to what they're going to do to bring some joy into this person's life, and we've done some cool things.
What's been the one that's touched you the most or moved you the most?
Well, I think probably the one where we took refugees to Chichester Harbour for a sailing, a day out sailing, and they were nominated by somebody that worked in a charity that helped refugees, and they thought that refugees would really love a trip. And they had the most wonderful day out, and they were beaming, and there were all ages, and men, women, and children from all different parts of the world. Got on the Happy Bus and went to Chichester for a day out on the boats, and they really loved it. They must have been through the most horrific experiences to get where they've come. So that was really nice. Yeah, we made a video of it. That's on our website too.
Bigleather.com, right?
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And what's the catchment for our listenership? How far will the bus come?
Well, it's a good question. It's mainly, it's kind of Brighton based at the moment. We'd love to take it to other places, but it's basically how far from Brighton the bus can get to and back in a day.
Okay. Right. So if you're listening in Spain, you might have to wait.
Yes.
Big Lemon takeover.
Yeah,
Right.
but there's no reason why the Happy Bus can't also run in other places.
Right.
And if other companies want to run a Happy Bus, then that would be really cool as well.
Right. And that's your expansion plan would, as you say, would be to replicate it. So not so much that that's companies creating their own Big Lemon companies in their communities, right? Is that how you see that working?
Yeah. And there's various different ways that it could work in practice, but that's mainly I think a big part of what we'd like to do is to help other people in other communities set up something similar to the Big Lemon in their community, so that they can have that community focused sustainable transport there as well. And we're kind of we're agnostic really as to whether we run those services or we just help other people to set it up and then they run them themselves, or whether indeed other established bus companies look at what we're doing and think, well, wait a minute, why don't we run a service that's more focused on the community and more runs more sustainable vehicles. So we're interested in working with anyone really.
Right.
Yeah, for us we're not precious about how we get there, but our vision for 2030 is for there to be sustainable transport in every community in the company that's zero emissions, powered by renewables and owned by the community.
Wow. Yeah, it's a great vision. And in terms of the model, so have you come across Bertshog, the nursing company in Holland?
I've heard about them.
But
yes, I have heard about them. I don't know very much about them, but I have heard about them.
But very similar in terms of what reminds me of is your sort of expansion ideas. So the guy he's a nurse who set the thing up, and I don't think they necessarily set up as separate companies, but they're definitely set up as within the idea of you have a nursing team for a community, and then expansion happens organically when groups of nurses in new communities decide to create their own version of Bertshog in their community, and then anything they need from the centre is just a pull. So if they need some service from the centre, they get it from as a pull from the centre. But then the other thing that's interesting is the CEO of that company spends most of his time consulting for free for other companies in terms of how they can be more like his company.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Because not having so much central control means that he's not having to make hundreds of decisions every day like most CEOs. So he's, in fact, the reason I know this story is Frederick Laloux, who wrote Reinventing Organizations, tried to get a meeting with this guy, and the guy responds back and he says, "Hey, my diary is free for the next month. Pick your spot." What CEO has a diary that looks like that? So. It just reminds me when you're thinking about how part of your model might be helping others to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we like to do. I think this human scale is very important. That it's not just growing and growing and growing and becoming really big. It's actually just doing having a small community-based, family-orientated community business working in every community. And ultimately I think that needs to be driven by local people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've had a good run. My final question for all my guests then is Tom Druitt, what does it mean for you to be human?
Wow. I think it means playing So for me, I think it means two things. It means following your own vision, your own destiny, your purpose in life, and giving something to your community. We're social beings. We've grown up in communities since day one, and we have amazing capacity as human beings to follow our vision of what we want the world to look like, and we have a responsibility to our fellow humans to try and improve the world.
Fantastic. No, that moved me. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure chatting. Hopefully it's been interesting to people.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure it was. I mean, yes. I'm sure people will get a lot of value from the story. So for people to learn more about Big Lemon, is it thebiglemon.com? Is that
yes.
right?
And
yes, they can follow you on Twitter.
Yeah.
And you've got a blog. Yeah. You've got the Tom Druitt blog, right? WordPress.
Yes, the main Big Lemon blog is on our website. There's a news page with a number of posts. I've also been blogging in the past. I haven't put up very much recently, but tomdruitt.wordpress.com shows a few thoughts in there.
So it relates to your activism. Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And we'll put the links to the research about the lifetime impact of the vehicles for people if they're interested in that side of it.
Cool.
Other than that, thank you. Thank you, Tom, for being human. Thank you.
Nice one. Cheers.